Right, a very chilly morning in the capital city. Some drizzling this morning as the country again sets in a very big day where the country will be led by President Uhuru Kenyatta in bidding the last send-off of the late President Mwai Kibaki in what is a day that will be filled with different emotions, engulfed with the climax where the different leaders will gather together with the Kenyans to be able to give the last send-off to late President Mwai Kibaki, who is a fallen hero, a president that has been referred to many legislators as one of the Kenya's best president. That is what will be happening today, and there is so much to talk about this morning in regards to what will be happening, because as you understand already, there is the National Requiem Mass that will be going on at the Nyayo National Stadium, where Kenyans are expected to gather together with the leaders to give the last respect to the late president, retired President Mwai Kibaki. And as you understand right now, the body of the late President Mwai Kibaki will be leaving the Lee Funeral Home to the State House, and where it will be performed some military traditions and customs, and thereafter will be there will be a procession right from State House all through State House Road, through Uhuru Highway, entry to the Nyayo Stadium, because that is what is the culture in what we refer as the state funeral. So there is so much that will be happening all through the day, and this morning we'll be taking a look at what is happening right at the Nyayo National Stadium, and what is happening from the Lee Funeral Home as they head to the State House. And we'll also be trying to capture the procession right from State House all the way to Nyayo National Stadium. So welcome aboard this morning. It is the 29th of April 2022, where the country is engulfed in a somber mood to be able to send off one of the greatest presidents the country has ever received. Understanding what President Mwai Kibaki was able to do in his tenure of 10 years while he was still in power, leading this country right from 2002 when he took the tools of power from the Kanu regime. There is so much to talk about with what he has been able to do, and what has been able to transpire in between, and at the time that he was retiring, what he left, and what situation we find ourselves this year of 2022, 10 years, exactly 10 years later after he retired. So it is a big day. It is a big day for Kenyans and the continent at large to bid farewell to one of the country's biggest president that served the country for 10 years. And as you understand, there will be so many activities that will be happening today in regards to what we expect to be a climax of the event at the Nyayo National Stadium. So you should expect a lot of traffic congestion in parts of the city, with the roads leading to Nyayo National Stadium, especially Mombasa Road will be at a standstill at some point when the procession will be leaving the State House all the way to the Nyayo National Stadium. Those that will be using the Uhuru Highway will also have to suffer, because the procession will leave from the State House by foot, and the body of the late president will be ferried by the military carrier vehicle that will be moving right from State House all the way to Nyayo National Stadium on foot, by the being escorted by the parade of the military. And so much will be happening because the funeral arrangements and the funeral itself is under the military. So we expect all the protocols to be observed to be those of military. So this morning we'll be taking a look at what President Mwai Kibaki has been able to achieve. And just before that, I want us to just take a look at the dailies, what they have written today, because they have so much written in regards to the final journey of Kibaki. So right now we take a look at what the newspapers have written on their front pages, and then we get to start this morning in covering this particular event that is expected to be one of the greatest events, the second recent state funeral of a retired president, after that of Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi that happened in 2020. 2 years later, President Uhuru Kenyatta is yet again leading another state funeral of a retired president, that is Emilio Mwai Kibaki. So we take a look at what is happening on the dailies, and then we get into our discussion this morning. All right, and just to begin with the Daily Nation has its front page with that picture of President Mwai Kibaki, retired President Mwai Kibaki, where they talk about the year that he was born, that is 1931 to 2022, and talks about the final journey begins. Farewell, a funeral service in Nairobi today will be attended by global dignitaries, which will start with a series of events that will lead to interment of Mwai Kibaki's remains in the private ceremony that will be conducted in Othaya tomorrow in Nyeri County. That is a story that is also making headline in other newspapers. The legacy of Mwai Kibaki. So many stories that have been written there by the Daily Nation in regards to Mwai Kibaki, and the Standard newspaper as well has not been left out in sending their last final honor to President Mwai Kibaki, with a story there talking about the city that gave Kibaki a foothold and cheered him into the top leadership, governs to bid him bye for the last time. His successor, President Uhuru Kenyatta, leading at least 3 heads of state and a host of dignitaries and the nation in paying tribute to the statesman. Of course, Nairobi being a very significant city for retired late President Mwai Kibaki, because remember, he began his career, his political career, as the member of parliament of Makadara constituency, then Donholm. That is where he began his political journey, being a member of parliament. So it's quite a significant city for him to be sent off this particular morning. That is a story that has been written also by the Standard newspaper. Apart from that, there is other stories inside, but the bigger picture is the story of the final send-off of Mwai Kibaki. Life and times of Mwai Kibaki is what the Star newspaper is talking about this morning. Son of a peasant farmers, he was known for turning around the economy, and of course we'll also be trying to look at what economic legacy he was able to leave, and as we also mark this day where President Uhuru Kenyatta will be leading Kenyans to mourn and also to give their last respect to the Kenya's biggest president. And that is what the daily papers have written this morning. All right, and now as we get into our discussion this morning, all right, and after taking a review of what the dailies have written this morning, just in case you're joining us, remember this is Kirk TV in the morning. We are streaming live on Facebook at Kirk TV Kenya and YouTube at Kirk TV Kenya. You can join in and say and give in your feedback. Remember, it's a big day that we are mourning, and also the country is engulfed in different emotions in the last day to bid respect to the late President Mwai Kibaki, who passed on 1 week ago, and President Uhuru Kenyatta is expected to lead mourners in bidding their last respect. And as we understand right now, the body of the late President Mwai Kibaki will be leaving the Lee Funeral Home and head to the State House, where the military will perform their customs and traditions before they make a procession into the Nyayo National Stadium, where Kenyans are still streaming in right now as they also try to get their position to be able to be part of the big ceremony of sending their last respect for President Mwai Kibaki. And I just want to introduce my panel this morning as we talk about what is happening today and the bigger picture of who we are sending off this particular morning. And on my near right here is Oleso Odhiambo, who is a political strategist. Of course, it's been a week where we've been talking matters to do with politics and the politics of exchanges, but this week I think even the mood this morning is quite different. So welcome, Mr. Oleso Odhiambo. And in between is Francis Ireri, who is a member of parliament aspirant for Naivasha constituency. So welcome again for the first time in this show, Kirk TV in the morning. And on the far right is Biko Ashoya, who is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, also will be part of this panel to be able to, remember the late Mwai Kibaki. And I just want to begin with one question, And to each of you, just to begin with you, Bwana Oleso, as we start and as you've seen all the plans for this day, you've seen what is expected to happen today, and of course it's not something new, but again we are sending off someone who has been referred to as the greatest president of this republic. What do you take of today's events as we kickstart the day?
Okay, thank you so much. So, first of all, let me join other Kenyans in paying my last respect to a man. As a country, we have always had a honor to live during his presidency. Today, we are going to send off a man who has been highly praised when it comes to the matters of economy. Of course, it is so obvious that you cannot discuss today's economic situation without the mention of the name Stanley Mwai Kibaki. So he's a man who has done a good job for our country, and being a day that it is a very last day that we are saying bid farewell to him. I think. As a republic, we are mourning somebody that will have wished to live long, and maybe also drink a cup of wisdom from what he can advise, even going forward on the next regime.
Mm-hmm. And for you, Francis, you've also been, saying what has been happening, and today is the climax of what we refer to as yet another state funeral of one of the country's greatest president. What do you make of today's events?
Thank you very much. I also want to join the rest of the Kenyans in mourning our greatest president. Kenya has lost an iconic leader who really gave us hope. And to the family of Emilio Kibaki, my deepest condolences. Now, today we expect to see a lot of leaders coming together in praising a president who really had a great impact in their lives and their careers as politicians. And then this generation that for the decade he was president, we're going to see people, Kenyans coming together to really give a send-off to a man who had given them hope. Because I recall during his presidency, there was the euphoria when he became president. I've never seen a country so happy in the history of Kenya, whereby all manner of people from all over the country came together. So I believe the country is in a sober mood, and it's a very sad day for the Kenyans.
Mm-hmm. Biko, what do you take of today's events now that there's so much that is happening? We know we've not been treated to this kind of situation for quite some time, but now we see another state funeral in 2 years succession. What do you take of this particular one?
Good morning, Kenyans. First, for me, I choose to celebrate him, actually, instead of mourning him, to actually celebrate for the time that we got to interact with him and even benefit from his leadership as the president of this country. And that is probably the apex of what any political leader would want to achieve in their political career. Because just like you've said this morning, he started from being member of parliament in what is now the Makadara constituency, and then he rose up in the ranks until he became the president. So in his political career or in his political journey, he really, he really had that massive experience, and so that by the time he was now getting to the presidency, that is the apex of any politician's political life. He was a seasoned politician. He was a seasoned leader. And that is why most Kenyans have come up to actually say that he was quite good in what he did as a president of this great republic. So I chose to celebrate him today, and even considering the fact that he's passed on at a really advanced age. I'm told in the Bible it's been guaranteed to us that man shall live to 70 years, and anything that you live beyond that, is a bonus. Okay. So yeah, he's died after he's lived his 70 years that even is guaranteed in the Bible, and I choose to celebrate him this morning. Yeah.
And of course, that is each one of you trying to put out what they have their thoughts about President Mwai Kibaki. But there is so much that you're expecting to happen today, and because it's the last send-off of retired President Mwai Kibaki. And in case you're wondering why we are doing this, because President Mwai Kibaki has lived for 90 years, and in between that is what he was able to become the President of the Republic of Kenya for 10 years, right from 2002. And his climb to the presidency was not that easy, because for two times, 1992 and 97, he was able to run for presidency, but still unsuccessful. But when he took tools of power is what now becoming the reference of what the country needed, and what he was able to do in the 10 years that he was the president. Mr. Oleso, just to come back to you, for the 10 years that Mwai Kibaki was able, to be able to lead this country, there is so much. I was listening to the legislators trying to put out what they feel he did and did not do, but nobody was able to say that he did not do anything that he promised. What do you take of the Kibaki legacy?
Oh, that's great. But from Kibaki's legacy, I choose to borrow from Ngugi wa Thiong'o's words that when a man falls, I think we need to put his trajectory of life to a scale of both the things he did positively and the other side. And as I think I'm also happy with the current situation. I think we are also trying to move from the culture where when we as human beings, when we are gone, that we are only supposed to talk about the other side of life, and this one is should not be attempted. So I think one need to be glorified and also vilified if need be in equal measures. But for President Kibaki, this is a man, I think, irrespective of whichever political persuasion you stand or back then, we will agree that this is a great man who transformed this country to the levels that we didn't expect to that extent. To begin with, President Kibaki came into power after a 24-year rule by Moi. A rule that many will say was sort of a dictatorship, considering that the better part of that rule was under one-party state. And so the coming in of President Mwai Kibaki got the country into a celebration mood, because at least there was a beginning of a new era after the 24-year rule of President Moi. So the beginning of President Kibaki's presidency ushered in a new hope for the country, and of course he came in with a lot of promises, and so much was also expected from him. But personally, what I'm happy about the presidency is that as much as we had a lot of hope in his presidency, unlike other leaders, where much is promised and very little can be observed at the end of the term, at least President Kibaki tried to live to his word. Of course, when we start on that, the reintroduction of free primary education, which at some point personally I was also a beneficiary of the same. So I cannot begin without mentioning that, because around 1960, 1970, there was a free primary education, but then that was phased out during President Moi's time. So when Kibaki came in, and then he came with the slogan of education is the best equalizer between the rich and the poor, and then the free introduction. I think most of us, maybe those who will not have a chance to attend school because of the finances, we got that chance. We also are aware that the Vision 2030 was crafted within the President Kibaki's again time, and that is something we are trying to live up to and ensure just that by the time we get into 2030, Kenya needs to be at a place where we look forward of being. So that's something also I will want to give credit to President Kibaki. And then, of course, the issue of the progress that we've made within our Kenyan economy was realized during President Kibaki's tenure as president. Mega projects that he embarked on, including the Thika superhighway. There was also the legislative and institutional reforms that we achieved through the 2010 constitution that we enacted during his presidency. So in a nutshell, I'll say that President Kibaki's tenure was that which was progressive, and by the time he was leaving office, he had placed the country where he ought to have left it when he's leaving office.
There was so much hope when he was taking in power, and of what he promised, a lot he did in that the education sector was one of his key manifesto, and he was able to achieve that in a big way. So for the economic resurrection and the education sector, do you think, or rather, do you feel that up to now we are living up to his, genesis of the economic resurrection and also the education sector revival?
Yes, pretty much yes. My good friend Oleso has mentioned about the introduction of FP way back when President Kibaki got into leadership, which, if you asked me, was the highlight of the genesis of his leadership as the president. We of course Kenya that there was liberalization of the economy, and the opening up of the economy really, and invitation of investors, just opening up that space. And you would remember that is the time when even let's just bring it back home. Even TV stations, media, media houses and all that, because initially we had it was a preserve of, let's say, KBC and KTN and NTV. But then after President Kibaki took over the reins of the country, that is now when we saw liberalization of his leadership. He gifted us the Constitution of Kenya 2010. And with that, it came with so many things. We can't even exhaust the benefits of the Constitution of Kenya 2010. And as you remember, as of 2010, he was just remaining with a few months to his exit from the presidency. So for me, the best gift that he ever gave to Kenyans, even as he exited the political scene and even the leadership scene, was the Constitution of Kenya 2010. And the benefits of that Constitution have been immense. Yes.
Already, the regime of President the late President Mwai Kibaki, and now where we are, do you feel that we've gone down or we've made a step ahead?
I think we have made significant steps forward and backward. So I'll say we see at a very, very difficult time when he had fallen out with the former President Arap Moi, and being the vice president, he stepped down and tried to go for the presidency for 2 terms. And when he took over the presidency, we recall very well he was involved in an accident, and it was a very, very trying time. People were so happy the president has taken over, and there was so much that he did in 10 years. And I would like us leaders to really emulate his way of leadership. He was really focused. He didn't allow things to really pull him back. And as Biko said, he's brought up good changes, like for the constitution. We'll remember him for that. Also expanding our market for commodities, like for instance export processing zones. And when you open EPZ, we can check, for instance, places like EPZ when he was the president. I'll say we have taken some steps behind, but also we're moving forward. And it's that kind of a mixture, and I hope that we can be able to really copy or emulate his way of leading the country, so that we can really focus on what's supposed to be done. because if there's I recall when any challenges were there, because there were mixture of progress and hard times for the president. You remember there was attacks of the bandits with the police and exactly. But he was able to really contain himself and focus and bring Kenya to where he was supposed to be. And I think that's what we ought to do, continue doing. And we are at par because of the challenges now with Corona and which has taken us back. But I'm proud that the things that he started, the current government has been able to really complete. Yes.
And Biko, there's some economic policies and political policies that late President Mwai Kibaki was able to put in place. But as well, he was characterized as one politician who was very unique in that in his way of leadership and his way of politics. What do you take of President Mwai Kibaki's political conduct, and as you also compare with what we've seen post his retirement?
I would want to say that President Kibaki's way of leadership was that one of maturity. He is one politician who had seen it all. He had experienced it all. There is nothing so out of the ordinary that President Kibaki had not seen in his, he was a career politician, right? Much as he was an economist, but then you see his, that 90% of his life had been spent in politics. So by the time he was ascending to the presidency, he is one guy who had a different view of what really politics is, of what presidency is, because you see, and he had been a cabinet minister, or he had been a cabinet secretary, a minister back in the days, for a very long time. So he is someone who had interacted with what presidency is. He's one person who had interacted with what being a member of parliament is. And he had experienced it all. So when he was actually coming into the position of being a president, he came in with a vast or with a wealth of experience. And as many people have said, President Kibaki is not the kind of guy that you would approach with half facts. He's one person that you would really, if you were to have a conversation with him, and he's one person who never entertained petty conversations. So this speaks to a person who was experienced, someone who was focused, someone who knew what he wanted for the country, and someone who was very mature. And that is the kind of leadership that President Kibaki gave us. Someone who was was very focused in what he wanted. Like, let's say, for instance, reviving of the economy, right? He knew what he wanted. He knew what he wanted for the economy that is Kenya. If we are talking about political leadership, he knew what he wanted out of the political leadership that we have as a country. So the summation of it all is that President Kibaki brought a lot of maturity into politics. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And Bwana Leso, yes. Mwai Kibaki was one very, very strict president as well, and also a very charismatic president. And you've seen his statements, how he was able to put out. Sometimes he would go offensive, sometimes he would be making a joke, while at the same time he's sending a very serious message to you. As you laugh, I remember there was one clip that someone was heckling him from somewhere at the down podium, and then he was just saying, "Wewe wacha upumbavu." Then at some point the guy persisted. You've seen that heckling that happens in the politics, and then he was saying, "Ukileta vurugu tutakutoa hapa." The guy continued, but immediately the face of the president now changed into that. Wait, Odo Jama. I mean, that was the end of it. It began as a joke, and that is what you could even legislators saying. You would go to Kibaki, joking with him, but at the end of the day, he tells you what you do. So, what do you take of the president's, his political life and what he was able to put out when he was president?
one man who was able to differentiate this, and maybe if it is a political office, we tend to separate service to the people and politics. So President Kibaki actually had mastered what he needed to do once he got into office, and that's why we were able to see that in many circumstances, the president was able to separate what he needed to do and the prevailing political circumstances of the moment. And that answers to the question, because especially you remember during his first term, when he fell out with the Raila Odinga-led group, and there was a lot of push and pull within that government, and it went to a scenario where he was compelled to sack almost the entire of his cabinet because of the politics that were playing around. But I was trying to imagine if he was somebody who had not really mastered what he needed to do, when you get to a situation where almost, and remember that time the cabinets, the ministers were elected member of parliament. And so when you get to a point where like almost entirely everybody is disrupting your government, it takes a man with the wisdom to be able to know what to do and still steer the country forward. And of course, we saw that he managed well, and we proceeded and even finished his first term and then went for the second term. And also, the second thing is when President Kibaki was coming into power, remember we have, back then we had the opposition which was divided. In 1992 election, of course, they approached that election as a divided opposition and lost to President Moi. Same thing happened in 1997. But when it came to 2002, President Kibaki was able to bring together all these opposition leaders and form one formidable team to take on a government-sponsored candidate for the election, and they eventually won. So this is a person who could as well bring people together and take the country where it needed to be.
And before I come to you, Redi, I understand that the body of the late President Mwai Kibaki is now headed to State House via the Valley Road, and we're getting the live pictures from the State House Road as the body of the late President is being now, being taken to the State House, where they will perform some military traditions and a brief session with the President Uhuru Kenyatta, where the body will also leave now with the major procession leading from the State House to the Nyayo National Stadium. The live pictures there you're seeing coming to you live from State House Road, where the body of the late President Mwai Kibaki is being ferried by the military procession to the State House, where we expect the President to lead a short session where they will be able to perform some military tasks, because that State House was the home of retired President Mwai Kibaki for quite 10 years. He was in State House, and that is why the body has to pass there for some military tradition. As we also, we also try to see what is happening at Nyayo Stadium, and at Nyayo Stadium we have Faith Kaulu, who is in Nyayo Stadium, who's been there since morning, and so much activities have been happening there. So Faith has been there, and I understand that she has an update on what is happening at the Nyayo National Stadium this morning. People have been streaming in live from morning, and she's been there, and I just want us to take a look at the update from Nyayo Stadium as well. As we understand, the body of late President Mwai Kibaki is now on its way to State House, where it will be performed some short session, and also the military tradition and customs before Nyayo Stadium. So we cross over to Nyayo Stadium, and Faith Kaulu to give us an update of what is happening at Nyayo National Stadium.
Well, a very good morning to you, Chris Sambo. Indeed, very bright and early. We were at the Nyayo National Stadium, ready for the last send-off, or rather state funeral, of His Excellency, the late third President of the Republic of Kenya, Mwai Kibaki. Kenyans have trickled in large numbers, as I believe Vincent Kerosi has shown you from the other end. And right about now, Kenyans are seated, eagerly waiting for the ceremony to begin. Any moment from now, it is exactly 7 minutes past 8 o'clock. The ceremony will begin. So any minute from now, his body is expected to leave the Relief Funeral Home, headed to the State House, where Sambo from the State House House, the military, or rather the KDF, Kenya Defence Forces, will march his body to the stadium. So his body or his casket will be covered with the national flag as a sign of respect to the late His Excellency Mwai Kibaki. And Sambu, just to let you know that this march is about a 6-kilometer march from the State House to the Nyayo National Stadium, where police have lined up the 6 kilometers already. This is from the State House to the Nyayo National Stadium. Right about now here, Kenyans are eagerly expecting and waiting for the ceremony to commence, which the ceremony will begin immediately the body of His Excellency the late Mwai Kibaki arrives. So Kenyans are waiting. The choir is entertaining the Kenyans that are already here, ready to celebrate and to mourn the third president of the Republic of Kenya. Many mentioning that, you know, they remember his leadership, his great contribution to the economic sector as well as the education sector, and so much more, including his comical speeches. Well, on the other end, as my camera person will show you, is where the dignitaries are expected to sit and give the speeches. Of course, 10 heads of state and governments are expected to be in attendance. This is from the neighboring communities and friends of the late President Mwai Kibaki. His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta will be in attendance, as well as is his deputy expected to be William Ruto, and of course the Prime Minister, rather former Prime Minister of the country, Raila Odinga, who cancelled his state's trip in order to attend the state funeral. So Chris Sambu, we are here at the Nyayo National Stadium. Definitely we will be letting you know how things unfold. Such a huge ceremony, the state is in mourning, but the good thing is we are also celebrating his huge contribution and his great and outstanding leadership. Back to you in studio, Chris Sambu.
All right, and that is our reporter Faith Kaulu is in Nyayo National Stadium, and she will also be giving us updates as we continue with our discussion here to see what is happening at the Nyayo National Stadium. Of course, it's a national, ceremony to bid farewell to one of the country's greatest president, that is the late Mwai Kibaki, born in 1931 and then rested in 2022. She'll be giving us an update of what is happening at the Nyayo National Stadium as well. We'll also be having Vincent Keros, who is also at the Nyayo National Stadium, and of course Kenyans, we are lining up to get into the stadium right now. Each and every person trying to grab their space in that particular Nyayo National Stadium, even as we have also the live pictures of the body of the late president being taken to the State House, where they will perform some military customs, and I understand that there will be also a short session that will be led by President Uhuru Kenyatta before the body is taken back again to before the body is now proceeded to the Nyayo National Stadium for the Requiem, for the National Requiem Mass. And just to come to you back to our discussion, we were talking about the life and the politics of late President Mwai Kibaki, and very charismatic president, a very strict president, as well a very open-minded president. Mr. Ireri, you were able to see what the leadership of President Mwai Kibaki and how he conducted himself as a politician, leave alone being a leader. As a politician, there's a difference between a leader and a politician. What do you take of the conduct of the late president as a politician? I mean,
as you said, you actually gotten the words out of my mouth. To me, Kibaki was more of a leader and not a politician. He's a leader who became a politician because, as my colleague said here, is you really found Kibaki getting into arguments that didn't have weight. You'd come to him, as you said, and that was a small issue, like, oh no, you are the person who's not working, and as we recall, as he had mentioned about firing the whole cabinet, he didn't politicize issues. He used to take the angle of leadership. He would apply leadership in his career as a president. But on the political side, I think he chose to ignore and not answer questions that would lead to arguments or different political viewpoint, and that's what made him a great president. And you see, in the first term, people used to think he's a president who will never talk, president who cannot bring developments, and only to realize that behind the scene, the guy was working. And You will not bring, as he has said, my colleague has said here, you will not bring to Kibaki a report that you have not done the report, you find your research well. You would assume that the president doesn't know what is happening, but he knew everything that was happening. He knew what expenditure in the government. He knew the projects that were ongoing, and he was a politician. Who was very suave and did his way more of a leader than a politician. That's my view on the same.
Mm-hmm. And there's so much. I was taking a look at what some of the statements that he was making, and when he was getting to power, Mr. Leso, he talked about, I'm coming to get rid of corruption, and I'm coming to make sure that each and every child gets education. So corruption and education being the major factors. And lately, we've talked about corruption being, we have had discussions before. Corruption being what is making us to make the steps backwards, because you said we are making steps forward and backwards.
Yes.
So corruption as well is one that has been termed to be, one of the biggest ailment of the country. But again, in the tenure of Kibaki, that was the biggest, manifesto for him to be able to say that I'm coming to fight corruption. And indeed, I don't know if he indeed fought the corruption, because if he fought the corruption, then perhaps it has resurrected, because that is what we've been talking about. I don't know.
From my perspective and how I view it, I remember when he came to power, and then there was a famous statement that he said that the government is no longer going to be run on the whims of individuals. And I think that was a strong statement that he was making, considering the fact that it was when he was just taking on power. And that was a commitment that is going to ensure that his government is a government of free, there is no space for corruption and the corrupt people. But also, as much as we may say that he had committed to that cause, at some point, especially during the first term of his presidency, we also saw some scandals, corruption scandals that took away billions of money from the public coffers in the name of corruption. And so we cannot really say that his presidency was free of corruption. But now, what according to me, I think what I find probably something that we could praise him is that Kibaki as an individual, even whichever way you will look at it, there is nowhere where you find that Kibaki's name is being mentioned in any scandal of corruption that has happened in this country. Even though these scandals that happened around 2 or 5 were happening in his government, but then there was no any suggestion that Kibaki as a person, or rather as a president, may have been involved. But also on that note, we could still as well say that at the end of the day, whether you are involved or not, you are the president of the Republic of Kenya. So when public money is stolen, you must take responsibility as the president of the Republic. I think to me, what he tried to do is that he really didn't come out to fight corruption, but he made it possible for the state officers who are working under his government to know that there is no space for corruption as we come in, as opposed to fighting it. So when the people who came in knew that the president is one man who will not entertain corruption. Mm-hmm. So I think that is what helped him. And even going into his second term as a president, I think the second term of President Kibaki didn't experience that, save for the maize scandal in which the agriculture minister was fired. And then the president reinstated him. So it brings about a lot of controversies, because this is a man who has been mentioned in the scandals, and your colleague in the cabinet, in the government, has decided to relieve him of his duties because of corruption. And as a president, you still reinstate that same person to that very office he was holding. So it sends mixed signals to the common mwananchi that what are your commitments to fight corruption. So I think when it comes to that, I think that is one area that maybe I believe Kibaki might have done better than he did.
Okay.
Yes.
And we're having live pictures from State House where the body of the late President Mwai Kibaki has arrived, where President Uhuru Kenyatta is leading a short military session where the customs and traditions of the military will be conducted in the next few minutes before the procession now fully moves from State House, live from State House, and head to Nyayo National Stadium, where the 6-kilometer walk will be conducted by the military. They will be walking all through, just to inform you that they will be walking right from the State House to the Nyayo National Stadium, 6-kilometer per se walk, where they will be ferrying the body of the late President Mwai Kibaki through a military procession that will be moving slowly by slowly. So we expect them to take the maximum minutes as they head to the Nyayo National Stadium. And just coming back to you, Irene, you've heard what Oleso said, that the President Mwai Kibaki did so much and tried to do much on corruption, but he did not succeed entirely, as we can say. But did he leave us at a position that we ought to have improved, in that now we are crying that corruption is what is ailing the country?
Yeah, what we'll say is when he took power, we remember that it was actually over a decade of rule of the previous regime rule, and there was no talk of corruption. We used to know corruption is a bribing here and there, and we never used to know about big scandals. Mm-hmm. When he came in power, yes, there were scandals that were there due to corruption, and they were never really followed up per se. We never got to know the results to the findings about the corruption scandals. But I would say what he did, he opened up transparency, because once there's transparency, you'll find the loopholes, and as before there was no transparency. So when he opened a transparent government whereby people could question where is this money going, where this project was started, they allocated some billion of shillings. So how was it used? So he helped shape the narrative that we Kenyans can follow up, and that's why you are witness of so many scandals that we are able to see, because was it not for Kibaki opening up and questioning those projects, we could not have it would not have come to limelight. So for me, I think he was fighting corruption from behind, and he had so much on his plate. He was focusing on development, which he brought a lot of development. He was also championing for the new constitution. Mm-hmm. I think for me, I'll give a 7 out of 10 in the journey for fighting corruption. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Biko, late President Mwai Kibaki, in majority of the statements and farewell, talks of different even political leaders, Kenyans at large, they are proud of what he was able to do. They are very proud. Do you think there's something that he failed while still in power? Now that we've talked much of what he was able to do you think that is a sector that he failed as a president?
Of course, we can't talk of his successes without talking about his failures. For me, really, I have two perspectives of who President Kibaki was. We have the President Kibaki of 2002 to 2007. And then we have the President Kibaki of 2007 to until when he finished his term. Those were two different sessions for President Kibaki. Because remember, after the post-election violence of 2008, 2007, 2008, it was a nusu mkate government, as they called it, right? And so we had this unique government that had the presidency, and then we had the prime minister, and so it was a shared responsibility. As to whether, as at that time or during that period of 2007 and 2013, when he exited the scene, he was in full control of government. That one is actually debatable, because there are some responsibilities that had been given to the then Prime Minister, that is Raila Odinga. The goodwill that President Kibaki had as at the time when he was getting into government in 2002 may have deteriorated with time, or even as he took over his second term as president. You remember in 2002, there was a lot of hope that so many things would change in Kenya in Kenya as a country, to the extent that it is from 2002 that we even saw unprecedented events, even by Kenyans themselves. You remember, I think, was it in 2003 when President Kibaki even came out very openly and said that if someone makes a mistake in public, or if someone commits a crime in public, you don't need to wait for the police officers to come and apprehend them. You can effect citizen arrest. Yeah, and you remember there was even a time when the citizenry got a traffic police officer, committing some offense, and they proceeded to arrest the police officer and frog march them to the nearest police station. So there was that air of hope, there was that air of change during that time, but then things slowed down in 2007, 2008, so that proceeding from 2008 from 2008 all the way to 2013, things were a bit mixed up. People had already started talking about the succession plan, Kibaki's succession plan. People, he slowed down from 2008, just like my colleague Bwana Oleswa said. We equally had, that is the time when we were talking about the Golden Bag scandal. That is when we talked about the maize scandal. So yes. So much as during his tenure, there was corruption had been tamed, and even pilferage of public funds, because it was during Kibaki's time that he cut down substantially on foreign trips. That is when even you would walk into a public office and the kawaida chai and maji, in public offices had been cut. And that is the time when Kibaki came in and said that it is not necessary for government officials to be walking around, for them to be walking around with the guzzlers. That is when he introduced the Passats, the VW Passats, that had the engine capacity of less than 2,000 cc's. So there was so much change that he brought in the public sector, or in the way that our leaders utilized public resources. He put it in the check. But then, just like my colleagues have said as well, there was parts of a few negative things here and there. But then, to a very large extent, we got a leader who was focused, who knew what he wanted, and he was really pushy on his ministers and the people who were working below him. If we even talk about revolutionizing our correctional facilities, when he brought in the vice president, and he gave him a very express mandate. Look at our prisons, look at our correction facilities. That is when we saw a lot of changes within that particular sector. So there were highlights of his leadership, but then there were also a few things here and there that he really never got it quite well. But now that he's gone, we can as well overlook the little things that he never got really right, and focus on the nice things. And
definitely that is what Kenyans have done. They have tried to overlook what he was not able to do.
Yes.
Because we say a human is a human, but I don't know if we will also say that for this regime.
I know Leso will not want to agree. I know Leso will not want to agree with me. He would want us to really come out, hard on even his misgivings. But then, yeah,
because definitely Kenyans have tried to overlook some areas where he wasn't able to deliver adequately. But coming to what is happening today, of course, we are sending off the final journey of one of the greatest presidents, of course. Mr. Eri, do you think, looking at the events of today, do you think we are doing justice in the kind of way we are sending off Mwai Kibaki?
I think currently we we somehow on track. There's so much democracy, and despite having small challenges, and I think it's two things. It's really two things. You know, when baby is getting the two things, and as we are trying to say here, by even overlooking whatever he didn't do. There's a saying in the African way. They say they know a cow had milk when it dies, but when it was alive, you are ignoring or you underestimating the kind of milk that he was
such
giving.
a translation from
Yes. So I think somehow we as Kenyans should really open our eyes, and now it's time for us to choose and elect leaders, as not politicians. Let's elect leaders, because if we do that, and I believe now the Kenyans now as a nation, we are open to see what kind of the way the economy has been. Life has been very expensive. So if you look and emulate, as we are saying, my colleague here said about how the president did. He brought down expenses in the government. So I hope. It's my hope, because Mwai Kibaki gave us hope, and when he said yote yanawezekana. So I was also saying the current regime and the coming regime, yote yanawezekana, that we can be able to really bring to fruition what you aspire to do in our economy, which is growth, and ensuring that everyone could afford the basic necessities.
And before we come to you, Lesson, the body of the late President Mwai Kibaki has already arrived at the State House. I don't know if we can get those live pictures there from the State House, where the President now, the clergy is now taking over to be able to lead the short session at the State House of Kenya, where President Uhuru Kenyatta is already there, witnessing the arrival and the body of the late President Mwai Kibaki. Those live pictures, they are coming to you live from the State House in Nairobi, where President Uhuru Kenyatta has already taken over the session, where he is leading senior government officials, the family, and the closest family members of the family of the late President Mwai Kibaki. As you can see there, those are his two sons and the family at large. The casket there, wrapped with the Kenyan flag, and we can just get to hear what is happening live from the State House.
The third President of the Republic of Kenya, His Excellency Mwai Kibaki. Eternal rest grant unto him, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon him. May he rest in peace. Amen. In the name of the Father, of the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
All right, and those are live pictures coming to you live from the State House, and as you can see there, those are the military procession. That is the military session where the body of the late President Mwai Kibaki is being taken through the tradition of the military and the customs. The State House here in Nairobi, where President Uhuru Kenyatta is already present. I think, and I understand as well, they're also preparing to make the biggest and the largest procession from the State House, leading all through to the Nyayo National Stadium, where he is expected to be given greatest send-off of a national state funeral, where Kenyans are already gathering in to be able to witness one of the send-off of the country's greatest president. There, the pictures coming to you live are those of the military in their, ceremonial regalia, now stepping out of the State House, where they were having this short session outside now, as they proceed to make, the short session and perform their customs. Before then, for some minutes, as they step out to proceed to the Nyayo National Stadium. Top senior government officials, top military officials, closest family members are the ones present at the State House in what is one of the shortest meeting and session that is expected to be conducted in the next few minutes. At around 10 a.m., the body of the late President Mwai Kibaki should be finding its way at the Nyayo National Stadium, and there are the military now performing what we say is the tradition and the customs of the military. Heavy security presence at the State House as the military session and custom takes place. President Uhuru Kenyatta is present, of course, being the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. He is the one who is leading that particular session. Those live pictures there showing you the magnitude of what we expect to be a climax of today's activities. And as they proceed, and you have to note that as they proceed to leave from State House, they will be closing some of the roads leading to Nyayo National Stadium. So in case you're using any of the roads between Uhuru Highway, the State House Road, all through Mombasa Road to the Nyayo National Stadium, then you should be able to avoid those routes, because in the next few minutes, as they jet out from, or rather as they leave the State House, there after the military performance of custom and tradition, there will be a lot of commotion and a lot of traffic as they try to clear the roads ahead of what is expected to be a national requiem mass at the Nyayo National Stadium. I don't know if you can get the live voices and pictures from the State House and hear what is happening and what the military is doing from the State House.
right, so still at State House there, we are seeing...
All right, and those are live pictures there of the State House session of the military conduct of their customs and traditions before the body of the late President Mwai Kibaki will be escorted by the military procession to the Nyayo National Stadium. Our reporters Faith Kaulu are on ground and following that procession closely. We'll be linking up with them as we continue with our program to be able to understand what is happening at that particular point right from the start at the State House all through via the Uhuru Highway entry into the Nyayo National Stadium. And of course, Kenyans have been streaming in the Nyayo National Stadium early morning to be able to get a glimpse of the last national ceremony to bid farewell to the country's third president, that is the late President Mwai Kibaki. And as early as 5:30 a.m. our reporters were already on ground to be able to try and gather what has been happening there. And I just want us to get an update of what transpired earlier on as Kenyans continued to stream in at the Nyayo National Stadium. And of course, having been told that by 8 a.m. they should have been settled for the program to be able to commence immediately, the body of the late President Mwai Kibaki arrives at the Nyayo National Stadium. Vincent Kerosi, who is our senior Swahili reporter, was able, to get a glimpse of the Kenyans being able to make their way into the Nyayo National Stadium. And as early as 7 a.m., the Nyayo National Stadium was already receiving quite a number of Kenyans. I just want to take a look at what he was able to compile earlier on before he got into follow in the procession of the president. And I understand, I'm being told that update will be coming to you shortly. And as I give you the updates of what is happening right now, the procession of the president is expected to leave the State House anytime from now to be able to get into the Nyayo National Stadium. And those pictures coming to your screen are those of Kenyans also streaming in live into the Nyayo National Stadium, where they are getting in one by one. And just to give you an update is that by 10 a.m. the program should have commenced. Therefore, in the next few minutes, the procession of the military is expected to make its way to the Nyayo National Stadium. Kenyans coming streaming in at the Nyayo National Stadium. I don't know if we have that clip ready. We can be able to take a look at the update on what Kenyans had to say while getting into the Nyayo National Stadium, even as they continue to make their way much more this particular moment.
Mzee,
utaniongoja kidogo.
Na mzee, naomba uniambie jina lako na mmetoka wapi na mbona
jina yangu ni James Matundura Haraka, ni chairman ya Abagusi Cultural and Development Council. Kiti nimekaa kwa miaka mingi, na mzee ambaye ameenda sasa President Kibaki, tulifanya kazi na yeye kwa muda mrefu. Tulikuwa tunampenda, alikuwa anapenda kwa Kisii, na vile vile tulimpenda zaidi wakati mambo ya boda boda ndio alilete, mambo ya CDF ndio alilete, mambo hiyo yote ni mzee tunapenda.
Kwa hivyo umetoka moja kwa moja kutoka Kisii ama namna gani?
Nimetoka usiku Kisii kwa sababu ya huyu mzee ambaye tunapenda kabisa.
Mmekuja na kikundi cha watu wangapi? Naona wameingia wengi mkiimba nyimbo za
sijui ni wangapi, lakini nimekuja gali mzima. Yeah.
Asante sana. Wacha nizungumze na huyu ambaye anakaa kijana kidogo kuliko. Utuambie jina lako, alafu utuambie unamkumbukia nini mzee.
Mzee, mimi naitwa Richard Arani Ogamba kutoka Kisii. Nimekuja na mzee wa Kisii wengi. Tumekuja kusuhudia vile mzee alitutengenezea mabarabara. Alikuwa anapenda viongozi wetu, hasa alikuwa anapenda mbunge wangu alikuwa anaitwa Jimmy Angwenyi. Ndiye alimleta Kisii sana kwa mambo ya mabarabara, kutengeneza mabarabara na mashule. Kwa hivyo tunamkumbuka kwa mambo ya CDF na mambo mingi sana alikuwa anapenda kwa Kisii zaidi.
Alafu ni kipi kile ambacho ungependa viongozi wa sasa waige kutoka kwa mwenda zake mzee Mwai Kibaki?
Ni upendo, alikuwa anapenda watu wengi, alikuwa anapenda kila mtu, alikuwa hana chuki na mtu yote. Tunataka watu waige mzee sana.
Asante. Utaniambia jina lako? microphone sijani. Tuelezee unaitwa nani na umetoka upande gani?
Naitwa Sujare Chomchilwa, natoka Vihiga County na nimekuja kupatiana last respect kwa president wetu mwenye alikuwa mzuri, akafanya watoto wetu akapata elimu ya bure. Na tunasema Mola amlaze pali peponi.
Umetoka Vihiga saa hizi ama jana usiku? Ulianza kusafiri saa ngapi?
Tulianza kusafiri saa 6 ya usiku. Tumefika hapa Nairobi saa 11 hivi.
Kwa sababu ya mapenzi ambao mlikuwa nayo kwa mwenda zake?
Ya mapenzi yenye tulikuwa naye na mwenda zake wa beloved president.
Yes. Ni uongozi wake ni kipi ambacho kwa kweli wewe utamkumbukia kwa uongozi wake miaka 10 alikuwa mamlakani?
Uchumi wake alifanya economic ikakuwa poa sana. Akafanya pesa ya CDF, hatukuwa tumejua hiyo pesa. Tukaanza kupata katika uongozi wake. Na hiyo ndio tunamkumbuka sana. Akafanya watoto wetu elimu ya bure ya msingi. Tunamshukuru.
Asante sana, ubarikiwe na pole kwa tunasema pole tu kwa kila mmoja.
Kibera namba 8.
Unamkumbukia mzee nini?
Namkumbia mzee alikuwa mzuri sana. Tulikuwa tunampenda. Lakini pole kwa kufa kwake. Mungu amsaidie.
Asante sana. Na mamangu umetoka upande gani labda?
Umetoka upande wa Muiga. Kieni.
Wapi?
Kieni.
Kieni kule ambako ni Nyeri.
Nyeri.
Kule ni karibu na kwa Kibaki. Kule nyumbani hali namna gani sasa hivi?
Huko ni kukofiti tu. Tulikuwa na hii sherehe ya Kibaki ya kuoboreza. Hakuna ubaya huko.
Umetoka Kieni ukaja Nairobi. Mbona ukusubiri uende ibada ya kesho kule mazikoni?
Tuliona afadhali tukuje ibada kwanza tuombe, alafu kesho tuende mazishi. Jua ni jirani yetu, ni neighbor, ni our neighbor.
Kule nyumbani mzee alifanya mengi, mnamkumbukia nini?
Alifanya mengi, tunamkumbuka juu alifanya mengi, alikuja huko akatua barabara ni mzuri, kila kitu huko yote ni mzuri. Huko Kieni.
Ni kipi ambacho ungeambia uongozi wa sasa na uongozi ujao uige kutoka kwa mzee mwenda zake hayati Mwai Kibaki?
Uongozi huyo wa mzee Kibaki tulikuwa na uongozi hii haina kitu. Hata uongozi hii ni chakula bei kali, kila kitu ni bei kali. Sasa uongozi hata kwa barabara gari zimepanda ni jatu. Lakini kwetu wakati Kibaki alikuja huko hatukokosagi mvua na nyesha kabisa.
Asante sana na pole.
All right, and that is Vincent Kerosi, is our senior Swahili reporter, is there on ground as well, following up on what is happening at the Nyayo National Stadium right now, still also following on the procession of President Uhuru Kenyatta. What Kenyans had to say earlier on as they continue to, find their way into the Nyayo National Stadium. Coming to you, Mr. Ireri, you've heard what Kenyans are saying, and they're turning out in large numbers to be able to bid farewell to the late President Mwai Kibaki. Coming from the statements you've heard there from Kenyans and all preparations today, what do you take of Kenyans and how do you feel of them?
As you can see, from the people who have come traveled all over the country, you can see we have lost a leader who had the Kenyans had felt the president. They are from the eastern, western, the central province. So I think we have lost a great leader, and it's my hope that the leader, we have leaders who love Kenyans across the country. That's my take, because of the kind of people that are coming from all over Kenya.
Alesso, yes. From the young people, you've even seen some of the old men, kidogo tu aongee mother tongue.
For the love of Kibaki.
For the love of Kibaki. What do you take of Kenyans this morning as they, get themselves into Nyayo National Stadium to bid farewell to late President Mwai Kibaki? And the emotions from many of the Kenyans, you can feel the passion they speak to. Like the last lady who spoke, they are saying that whenever Kibaki was in power, we felt it, and she was almost even getting emotional. How do you feel of Kenyans this morning?
I
Being
think
a Kenyan as well.
Well, being a Kenyan and living under the current circumstances, when you compare to the reign of President Kibaki, definitely one must appreciate that at least we had a Kibaki presidency, because when you put it into comparison, life was much better. But then something that Kibaki really managed to do, and maybe this current regime got it wrong, is that when Kibaki got into power, he tried to shun away the over-reliance on foreign donors to push the economic situation of the country. So Kibaki, he really invested, believed that the Kenyan economy can sustain itself. So he's a president who largely ran a government funded by the domestic revenue taxes collected from the people. And as such, it becomes easier to govern, because what you collect, you budget from within what you have. But now the successive regime that came after the president shifted from that approach and decided to rely on donors. And so we went on a spending spree where we budget for what we don't have, so we have to rely on foreign donors. And that becomes so costly, because when the time to start recovering that money back to the donors, you get yourself in a situation where you need to overtax the common person, and maybe at that particular point, money is not in people's pocket, but you still go ahead to overtax them. So that is why currently now you will be able to find yourself in a scenario where life becomes very difficult, because when you see them speak and they speak with passion, it's because they are trying to compare how things were back then and how they are today. It is not fair that one can say that Kenyans lead a dignified life like they did before. Of course, it is a fact that the current economic situation is a bit tough. And going forward, and the leadership to come, I will want them to restore hope to the people of Kenya, like Kibaki did when he came into power, because as things are at the moment, irrespective of the class of the social class in the society, everybody must be feeling the pinch of the current situation. And you have seen them speak very positively about this introduction of CDF, the free primary education, and there is also, in fact, the current program that this administration is implementing, the social protection welfare, was also a brainchild of President Kibaki. So the next regime is just implementing it. So to sum it up all, we really appreciate what the president did. And in terms of expanding the small and micro businesses, they mentioned the aspect of borders. Our late president that we are sending off today, at least believed in the ability of the common man who runs a small business, a small kiosk in Kawangware, a small shop in Kieni or there in Nyeri, that if you empower these people and make money available to these people, then they can be able to get a livelihood from their own activities. So that is the belief you have in your people as a leader is what drives the country forward. And that is what Kibaki had in our people. Lastly, Chris, when you see people speak about positively about President Kenyatta across the country, like almost every, we can comfortably say that almost every part of this country felt the Kibaki's presidency. It's because this is a gentleman who believed in policies that will have an impact on every Kenyan, irrespective of where they come from and irrespective of how they vote. We have a problem today, and truth be told, that the current situation is where the top leadership of the country may decide to take development projects in area where they perceive they have a following, excluding the areas where they think maybe their opponents come from. Yet the entire population of the country pays taxes. But I think Kibaki deviated from that norm and decided to introduce CDF that was cutting across the whole country, introducing the SMEs that was spread across the whole country. Border is felt across the entire nation. So I think that is what informs the appreciation and why people are praising the Kibaki leadership.
And coming to you, Biko, you've heard what Kenyans have been able to say today. Do you feel that these are emotions erupted in that these are Kenyans who feel that President Mwai Kibaki did his best and now is not how it should be?
Well, character. You really, as a person, would not, if you had issues with President Kibaki, then probably one would very comfortably say that those were your very personal issues, because for most Kenyans who never got to interact with President Kibaki in person, and those ones who knew him, from his either campaign trails or from the interactions through media and all that, you really do not have reason to dislike that gentleman. And over and above that, his leadership, the way he led the country, he led the country in what I would call in a very easy way, right? He never had a complicated way of leadership. For him, it was about giving services to Kenyans. It was about duty to the people who elected them into offices, and it was he never entertained anything less of that. So and that is why you'd see Kenyans really coming out in their numbers to just come and just come and celebrate the life that was of President Kibaki. And of course, over and above that, there are several things that he did to Kenyans, and which each of the speakers in this panel have spoken to, and what generally Kenyans have spoken to. So for me, I would say President Kibaki was a likable character, both in his demeanor as a person, both in his leadership style, both and also in the way that he addressed issues. You've given a very good example where someone was heckling him from the crowd, and he took it quite easy. And ordinarily one would expect that heckling a head of state would draw very dire consequences. But then he just takes it lightly, and probably he's looking at probably someone who is going through something, and just let him be, right? So that is why you are seeing, and then he had this sense of humor that was constantly ever there. So generally, he was a likable character. He was a nice person, and I'm not really shocked to see that Kenyans are coming out in their numbers to come and celebrate the life that was that of President Kibaki.
All right.
Yes.
And just before we come back and even continue the discussion, there is some of the moments that he was able, to put out statements that Kenyans were left wondering, is this ahead of state? So this is a compilation of what of some of the statements and rather the funny moments that Kibaki had while he was still the head of state.
maana gani duniani ikiwa wewe kazi yako ni wizi wa ng'ombe? Kweli una maana gani? Una maana wewe ni binadamu ya mavi ya kuku. Hii mvua itakuwa ni kidogo, wewe hapana. Hata gari yangu naona inatoroka yeye bure. Mwambie arudi nyuma. Ni pumbafu kabisa. Na kuna mwenyewe hapa, au ni mama au ni baba, angali anajivuna kutembea mbele ya watu na hana aibu. Mtu kama huyo ni bure kabisa, anahitaji kutwagwa makofi. Na usije ukiwa popote ukishakula pombe. Ukweli ni kwamba hakuna haja wewe kula pombe hata ndio ukateneme juu ya mtu wako. Hiyo wacha. Hiyo wacha. Na mukule pombe huko mkiwa peke yenu. Ikiwa unataka fujo, ndio tokea, tunataka kukuona. Lazima wa kila mtu, hakuna, hatutaki kuogopa yeyote. Yeyote ambaye hataki maendeleo mazuri, awe anataka kujenga Kenya yake, hiyo tutafuata na yeye atawacha tu. If you just hang around and don't register, you are useless. No, true. You can't be useful. You can't be any use. Now, I think you are just... Anyway, let me not say that. Sio lazima wewe kila siku ya pili ya tatu ati lazima uproduce mtoto. What the hell? Hapana. Hiyo ni kukosa adabu. Ana. Hiyo ni hatutaki kusema. Lakini yeyote ambaye anafikiri atatajirika kwa wizi wa ng'ombe, huyu amekuwa pupafu. Ati ukatukana hayo watu. No, haina maana. Wewe wacha kelele. Nyamaza we kule. Kama mnataka fitina, tutawatoa pale nyinyi mnataka fitina. Wacha fitina hiyo. Manake hakuna kitu. Wewe ondoka, muondoe huyo. Muondoe, aondoke kabisa. Tuwe tuachie joy. Sindio? Kwani ukiwa wewe unaishi ndani ya Nairobi na huna raha, sasa unangoja raha utapata nini? Ni lazima tupunguze ukulaji wa pombe. Na ukiwa wewe utaki kupunguza hiyo kitu, tutaonana.
And those are the statements on the life of late President Mwai Kibaki while he was still the head of state. Just quick reactions, because I understand as well the procession has already begun from State House to Nyayo National Stadium. Just quick reactions into what you've heard there and those clips of late President Mwai Kibaki.
I think President Kibaki introduced a very good style of handling serious issues in a way that that sends a strong message. You know, one of the things I think the people who worked around Kibaki knew that yes, he will be speaking the way he speaks, but then at the end of the day, there is a strong message that he is sending, and you dare ignore his direction, then consequences will follow, and that's why you will find a lot of effectiveness in his government, and that's why sometimes we say that. You don't really need to come out and show us, speak to us in a way that show how mighty you are. Leadership, in many cases, it really doesn't happen from when you come to the public and show us how tough you are and you want to speak and appear so big and mighty. Such things can be done in office, and when you come to the public, at least give public hope, give the people that you are leading hope, just make them friendly and feel free to be around with you, and that is, I think, the style that President Kibaki was used to, and it really worked well for him, and it really worked well for the country. Okay,
Ireri, what do you take? Quick reaction on Kibaki's way of politicking and the life that he lived.
Yeah, I think as my colleague is saying, he brought up humor to pass messages that were so easy for Kenyans to understand. And with that humor, you could feel Kenyans could understand. And those who could not understand his way of saying the humor part, they thought he was incoherent, like he was not saying something that was serious. Because I recall in Johannesburg once, the moment he took the government, when they were sharing the government, and he could say messages that were so deep, and later on you could understand what he was saying. So I think it was a good way of crossing messages that could not have been brought in a serious context, but passing out the message with humor and passing the message at the end of the day.
Sure. Just quick one on.
Yes, Chris. Even from the clips that you've played, how do you not like the character? Honestly,
very difficult.
even from the clips. But then my friends have said, he had a way of projecting. Very serious issues, in a very easy way. And the people who worked around him understood as much. That much as the president would be speaking in a very soft way, in a very comical way, but then there's a very serious message that he's then passing on. And it was then their responsibility to ensure that the president's message, is carried along, and it's acted upon. It's it is effected. So that was his leadership style, a very unique one. Yes.
And before we get to see the procession already leaving the State House, I want us to take a look at the Kenyan perspective this week, and we focused on the late President Mwai Kibaki. So we play the Kenyan perspective, and then we cross over to get live what is happening on the processional way out of State House to Nyayo National Stadium.
The country is mourning the demise of the third President of the Republic of Kenya, the late His Excellency Emilio Stanley Mwai Kibaki, whose demise was announced on the 22nd of April 2022, and therefore in memory of Mzee, as many would call him. On this week's Kenyan Perspective, we recall on the tough and happy moments of the late with the Kenyan citizens. Who is Mwai Kibaki? Many who define him as one of the coolest presidents Kenya has ever had in history. Many also who define him as the most hilarious president, who always made sure that his points and arguments were driven home with a lot of jokes and comedy. Above all, Kibaki is known to have boosted the economy of the country during his tenure. A lot of achievements lying in his way, amongst them being the famous Thika Superhighway in Nairobi. In the corridors of justice, he initiated the promulgation of the 2010 Kenyan Constitution, among other achievements in his tenure.
Duniani, ikiwa wewe kazi yako ni wizi wa ng'ombe, kweli una maana gani? Una maana wewe ni binadamu ya mavi ya kuku. Wewe hapa au ni mama au ni baba, angali anajivuna kutembea mbele ya watu na hana aibu. Mtu kama huyo ni bure kabisa, anahitaji kutwagwa makofi. Ije ukiwa popote, ukishakula pombe, Ukweli ni kwamba hakuna haja wewe kula pombe ati ndio ukatendeme juu ya mtu wako. Hiyo wacha.
Alifanya kazi yake. Uzuri wake ni kwamba alikuwa hana maneno mengi. Alikuwa very focused na chochote alikuwa anataka kufanya. Na hii maneno ya nani kama hii siasa ya sasa alikuwa hana. Yeye yake ilikuwa akisema neno amesema basi.
Neno yake ucheshi. Ile ucheshi ndio tulikuwa tunapenda. Hata kwa sasa hivi huwa tunaangalia sana YouTube mambo yake hivyo.
Siwezi ama hatuwezi enda kando na kinyume vile ambavyo mzee amekuwa wa maana ama muhimu katika nchi yetu ya Kenya. The fact is the economy of our country, the way it was raised from the era of Moi up to date, that is what we are enjoying.
Nafsi kama vile sasa tunaona hivi, sababu uongozi wake amekuwa ni mzee wa kupenda wananchi wake wakati uongozi wake. Hasa mimi binafsi wakati nilikuwa nikisoma, mzee aliweza kutoa elimu ya bure ambapo ilinifaisha mimi na ikaniweka kwa nafasi ambayo niko sahihi. Diposa ninasema mzee hata kama ameenda yenyewe amesaidia wananchi wake kupata afya, maisha bora na pia kuimarisha uchumi wa nchi yetu.
Na mkumbuka kwa ekonomi yake alifanyia wana Kenya. Kwa uzuri alifanyia watoto wangu.
Kwanza hili linifurahisha kabisa ni vitabu. Vitabu alituletea shule na kuambia tulikuwa watoto 20 wanasoma kitabu moja. Na kuambia vitabu zilikuja shule mpaka sisi tukafurahia.
President Kibaki will be remembered as the first ever president of the Republic of Kenya to revive the economy of the country. President Mwai Kibaki, the legendary economy master. Dennis Munene for Kirk TV.
All right, and that is a well-packaged short documentary by Dennis Monene on the Kenyan perspective, bidding farewell to the late President Mwai Kibaki, who is expected to be sent off today and tomorrow. Today being the National Requiem Mass for his state funeral, as well as also the burial that will take place in Othaya in Nyeri County. Already the military procession has left State House and now proceeding to the Nyayo National Stadium. So we'll just take a look at what is happening, live pictures from the processional way at State House leaving to the Nyayo National Stadium, the procession that is carrying the body of the late President Mwai Kibaki. So we get the live pictures and then we continue with our discussion. And I understand that those pictures will be coming to your screen shortly as we get them as they are live from the location. And already on your screen you can see their things are all set now, and the body of the late president will be arriving at the Nyayo National Stadium anytime from now, because the military procession has left State House and now moving slowly by slowly, expected to take some few minutes or rather some less than an hour before they get to the Nyayo National Stadium, expected to arrive at around 10 a.m. or rather 10:15 at the Nyayo National Stadium. So we get the live pictures and the live sounds from the processional way at the State House leading to the Nyayo National Stadium. All right, and those are live pictures coming to you live from the procession away. Already the military procession has already left the State House and heading to Nyayo National Stadium. Our reporters Vincent Kerosi and Faith Kauli already camping at different places at the Nyayo National Stadium, as well as following the entire procession right from the start to the end, and they'll also be giving the update of what will be transpiring right on the ground. And just to come back to my panel as we also conclude, so that we can leave you with the live images and audio from the ground on what is happening. This lesson, the climax of this national requiem mass is expected in the next few minutes. So I just want us to conclude this discussion, because as soon as the body arrives at the Nyayo National Stadium, now everything will come to a standstill, because I know my director will also cut us on air. But before he does that, because I can see that coming, we need to conclude gracefully.
Yes.
What would be your parting shot this morning as we bid farewell to the late president? Perhaps we will not be able to do this again anytime soon, God willing. So what would be your parting shot and conclusively your message this morning as we mourn one of the Kenya's greatest presidents?
As we celebrate, let me also use the words of my friend Biko, that as we continue celebrating the life of our beloved former president, Kibaki, the message I have is that Kibaki gave us a country. Kibaki gave us a country that was thriving in economy. And what we need to do as Kenyans, you see now sometimes we tend to think that the responsibility of pushing the agenda that, or rather the foundation that President Kibaki left us with, is only left to the leaders. But also as citizens, we have a major role to play and ensure that that legacy lives on. So to me, I'll just, my message to fellow Kenyans and leaders also, is that let us build on the foundation, let us build on a thriving economy that President Kibaki gave us or handed over to us when he was going into retire. And in African way, or how we do it as Africans, is that if you want to, the best legacy you can give to somebody that was so dear to you, or somebody who had a remarkable contribution, is to try and carry on with what he had started. And therefore, if at all we really need to celebrate what President Kibaki did, is we need to carry on with his legacy. We need to carry on the legacy of ensuring that the economy goes back to where it was, or even surpasses the levels that it was when he gave it to us. The things that he believed in, the aspect of small and micro businesses, that is a responsibility for the leaders to ensure that they continue supporting those activities. Because it doesn't make sense if you laud somebody, if you praise somebody that, oh, he was good in all these things, and at the same time, when given an opportunity, you cannot build, or rather maybe proceed with what he started. So to me, let us first of all build on that, if at all we need to give President Kibaki a befitting send-off. And lastly, it is also a reminder to the leadership to come in the next, the subsequent holders of the office of the president, that office still, it is an office. Once you are elected, it is an office. And humility is a virtue that serves in the public sector when you've been given an office to take. So maybe the people to come, I think they can borrow from the humility of President Kibaki. They can borrow from the humor of President Kibaki. You don't need to come and lecture us every day. We are already stressed with the with the current economic situation. So at least they should make the presidency admirable to the citizens, as opposed to being that of I'm a ruler. Please be a servant, don't be a ruler, for those to come to that top seat. Okay.
Saveri, your parting shot?
For me, we have lost a great leader, and it's time for us Kenyans to keep that legacy. He brought us money in our wards. He brought us money in our constituency. He brought us money in our counties, and it's for us Kenyans to really focus on development that our leaders started. And secondly, is for us to have leaders and elect leaders that are going to bring Kenyans together, as we have seen from the takes of today in the morning. There were Kenyans from all walks of life. They came to give their final condolences to farewell to the late President Emilio Mwai Kibaki. And also for myself personally, he gave me hope. He told me that everything was possible at Yanawezekana, and to that I became a prisoner of hope. So I would say, let's learn to be hopeful. Let's give Kenyans hope that it's possible for us to have a country that it's prosperous, a country that's free of corruption, and a country that can grow within a space of 10, 15 years. So to all Kenyans, let's focus on our own personal goals. Let's focus on the agendas of our people as leaders. And as we have said, let's now elect leaders who are going to propel Kenya to the next level, so that we can keep the legacy that the late Emilio Kibaki left us behind.
Okay, Ashoya, as we also conclude, your parting shot.
Yes, in conclusion, I will begin from where I will end from where I began. Kenya has lost its king. We choose to celebrate this king that we have lost. But then, even more importantly, it gives us a time to reflect on the good things that he did. Emulate the good things that he did while in presidency, but while at the same time also learn from the mistakes that he did. Just like my good friend Oleso said, it is also a time for us to, for our leadership to, it's a self-reflection, reflection moment, where we want to ask ourselves, when it comes to that period when we shall be gone, what will people say? What would Kenyans say of our leadership? What would they say of the moment that they gave us as leaders, just to lead them? So there is so much to learn from this period that then would help us, moving forward as a country. But then we choose to celebrate the life that the good Lord gave us to experience with President Kibaki. And we should reflect as Kenyans.
And those are very strong statements, of course, a reflection of a majority of the Kenyans. And because already the program is a few minutes from starting at the Nyayo National Stadium, we'll be crossing there live. So for this session, I say thank you so much for making time this morning to be able, to come and also bid farewell on TV for one of the greatest presidents. On my near right is Oleso Odhiambo. He's a political strategist, so you can be able to look out on the next discussions starting next week. He'll also be appearing. And we have Francis Ireri, who is a member of parliament aspirant for Naivasha constituency, as well made time to come this morning to be able to, give the final send-off of the late President Mwai Kibaki. And on the far right is Biko Ashoya, who is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya as well, making time to be able to be part of this panel this morning. And that is where we wind up this particular session this morning. Of course, so much to talk about President Mwai Kibaki, economic resurrection, education policies, the 2010 Constitution, and also introduction of the devolution. Some of the highlights of the late President Mwai Kibaki's tenure, 10 years tenure as a president. But today, Kenyans are in somber mood as they bid farewell to the country's greatest president. We leave you with the live pictures live from the Nyayo National Stadium, and also the procession now at Kenyatta Avenue leading to the Nyayo National Stadium, the military procession ferrying and carrying the body of the late President Mwai Kibaki. But for now, goodbye. My name is Chris Ambo. These are the live pictures